We are going to be painting a desert scene with cactus. The reference photo is over at my website. Link is in the video description if you want to paint along. I am working on a Frederick's watercolor canvas board. And just for transparency, this canvas was provided to me by Frederick's. They were already the only canvas that I used, so no difference there. Now you may be thinking, well, a watercolor, you're working in acrylics. Why would you use that? I love them for acrylics. They work so well for they're so smooth. And with acrylics and with getting smooth blending, that smooth surface is a very big deal. What I'm going to do is start with a sunset. So transition will be yellow, orange, red, magenta, blue. And this is going to keep our yellow from mixing with our blue and getting green in the sky where we don't want it. So a little tip there when you're trying to do a sunset, you're like the blue and the green keep mixing and the blue and the yellow mix and I get yellow. This is why we've got some buffer colors in between. This is a number 12. This is a tack lumber silk filbert. This is the master's touch. And I'm going to thin that with some water. I'm going to add a little bit of white. So it's going to give me kind of a peachy or a pale yellow color. And I'm going to start down here. Mine is much lighter yellow than what yours looks like on screen. Now I've got to keep in mind, black is going to be on a large portion of the bottom. So I need to pull yellow fairly far up. Farther than you think you're going to want it to be yellow. Now I'm going to mix a bit of red on the same brush. I don't even need to wipe it off. I can use the same yellow that's on there, and I want these two to mix together. Now, what I'm going to do is take my fine mist sprayer. So this guy, fine mist sprayer, this gives a really fine mist, hence the name. And I'm going to go lightly over that. A spray bottle like you use for your plants or cleaning the house or whatever you use a normal spray bottle for will not work the same. It needs to be that fine mist sprayer to get that super fine mist. Point is, I want this to stay wet as I blend. I'm going to get a little bit more of the red on my brush. And see, now I get that nice orange. If I had used orange with Liquitex, as much as I love Liquitex Basics, their orange is like, it's not good for applying the paint. I definitely prefer to mix. And I'm going to go ahead and blend this. And I want to make sure that if I have streaks, they go side to side. Keep them horizontal. I don't want to blend all over the place right now. Streaks are fine. As long as they're horizontal, they just look like streaks in the sky. And now I'm going to switch over to my deep violet. Any magenta sort of color would work. I'm going to let this pull and mix in too. And it can even come down. I've got a little bit too much water. Dab some of that off on my paper towel. Same thing, side to side. Now remember, we're not trying to really mix the colors together. We want a nice gradient. Don't overdo the blending because you will create a muddy mess where you don't have definite lights and darks. We want those lights and darks. And I think what I'm going to do is do this in 2 layers because this is a pretty fast project anyway. And that will give me a bit more richness and take away some of the pressure. One of the things that will often happen when you're painting and you're trying to figure out where the color goes, you're worried about getting the right color in addition to getting it blended perfectly. If we do this in 2 layers, we don't even have to worry so much about it. Plus right now we're fighting against the white of the canvas, which makes things a little bit more difficult anyway. So if we just do it in 2 layers, it will make life much easier. So that is what we're going to do. So now I'm going to go ahead and rinse this off. And I'm going to switch over to blue. I'm using primary blue tonight. Actually, all the colors I'm using, I've got primary blue, primary yellow, and primary red. And we're going to do this all on the top section here. I need this to stay wet, so if it starts to dry, I can take my fine mist sprayer and fix that. And the nice thing about doing this in layers, I can come back on the next layer and pull a little bit of black to darken the blue without worrying about it mixing in with my yellow right now. This is the downside of working on a canvas board. They're easy to store, they're easy to ship. They don't have anything to grip to, so I'm kind of trying to move my hand around to hold it in place as I move around. What did I need? Fine mist sprayer. Let's just lightly go over this. And the nice thing here, it's not even that big of a deal. If this starts to dry, none of it really matters because we're going to go on top of it and we know that. So that takes a lot of the pressure off this first layer. Do not pull that blue down very far. If I go down any further, it starts getting into my orange and into the yellow and I get a muddy color that I'm not looking for. Same thing. I'm going to lightly go over this. This brush that I'm using as a mop brush actually needs to be soaked in a brush cleaner. I'll be talking about that later, but it's creating streaks instead of taking them away. And that can happen for one of two reasons. If you're a blending brush like that, or your mop brush, really a powder brush is what I use. Link should be in the video description, but it works better. They don't shed like an actual mop brush. But what happens is if they start to get a little dirty, like I just didn't clean it that well, so it's a little too stiff, it'll create brush strokes instead of taking them away. Or if they start picking up too much paint, they get wet, they'll start creating brush strokes instead of taking them away. So I'm gonna go back over it with a really nice soft one. And you notice I'm going in a bit of a diagonal here just to tone this down some. I'll have to adjust that camera again. Mine's a bit overexposed now that I've made the adjustments. I guess it's close enough. I'll rinse those brushes off. I'm going to get everything nice and clean before I work on to the next stage. And the reason for that is this is going to dry anyway. My brushes, we don't want that to dry, so let's get those cleaned before something goes badly wrong. And I need to make sure all the blue is out of this time, because when I add the yellow again, we do not want that blue mixing in. So that is totally clean. I'm going to do the same thing, another layer right on top of that. Now I want my color, my goal here is to make sure my color is really saturated. So let's see, we've got our yellow paint, nice and bold. All this bright yellow down at the bottom, well, it doesn't really show on the camera, but that will be covered with the cactus and the landmass, so I'm not worried about that. This red is actually not that saturated, so it's a good thing I planned on doing, or that I decided to go ahead and do the 2 layers. Otherwise, that would be a dull end painting. And I want really bold here. I want to really capture that desert look. So I'm going to blend those. And see, I don't know if you can see on this, there's a few slight streaks. Good. That just looks like hints of cloud. We're good with that. Now I'm going to switch over to my deep violet. I'm going to use a lot this time. I want this to be way more bold. I'm not using nearly as much. I need a little more water than that, but not nearly as much as I did that first layer. See, it's less scary now. We've already mapped out how far do we want the magenta to go? How far do we want everything else to go? It's already mapped out on that first layer. Simplify things. Make it easier on yourself if you can. It already looks like a nice desert sunset. I'm loving it. And again, any streaks, you just want them horizontal. Streaks are fine as long as they're horizontal. Now mine right now looks a little pretty good chunk of blue. Right, actually there might be yellow. Ooh, there is. I made the mistake I told you guys not to do. I just did. So what I'm going to do is clean that brush. Didn't realize I still had yellow on there. I'm going to take a clean paper towel and I'm going to wipe some of that off because I do not want yellow up here. Much better. I want to overlap this a bit into my magenta. Now I'm going to pull a little bit of black on this, but not yet. I'm going to first pull the blue all the way. I want to keep the blue wet though, so if it starts to dry, I can use my fine mist sprayer. This is starting to dry before I blend, so let's get a little bit of water. I may have just gotten too much water. Worst case scenario, let's say I do this and I'm like, wow, that's a messy, horrible mess. Let it dry and put another layer over it. Don't be afraid of messing anything up here. You can't. There's nothing you can do right now that actually is something unfixable, which is really true most of the time when it comes to painting. Okay, I'm going to blend this a bit, just in between here. Now this, you can't really see the magenta right now because it's so overexposed. I'll fix that in just a second. Actually, I want more magenta. I'm going to wipe some of that brush off and take a big old scoop. I'm not even adding. There we go. And now let's use the mop brush and soften that out. Much better. That doesn't even look like anything on your screen. I'll show you in a moment. What happens when the purple or the magenta and the blue mix together, you basically get, it just looks like dioxazine purple. Okay, I'm going to wipe the paint off the brush. I'm gonna get a scoop of black. You've got a little bit of blue mixed in with it. And we're gonna get some up here. I need to mist that because it is starting to dry. Let's see if that's enough. Let's go ahead and fan that out. And my goal here is to get rid of the brush strokes, not to completely blend the black into the blue. I use the term blend, but what I'm really doing is getting rid of brush strokes, not... We're gonna dry this. Let me clean this brush first. I'm gonna add a little bit more. This is starting to dry, so this may not be one of my best choices. I mean, I can fix it if it pulls up, but that already looks better. Okay, let's see if that was good enough. Let's lightly mist that, and we will fan that out. Now is for the fun part. Now we are going to get stars on here. Let's do 2 layers of stars. So first layer is going to be a light blue. So they look, I've got some variation and it makes them kind of look farther away. What I want is a pretty stiff brush. You can use toothpaste. Don't use toothpaste. You can use toothbrushes. I've known of people that did that. And some water. This has to be thinned with water or it won't flick well. And I am just going to focus more up here. I really don't want the blue down in the sunset area. I don't care when I get to just straight white, but not with a light blue. And I prefer flicking the stars over painting them, dotting them. One, dotting them, and I used to do this, it takes forever. The other thing is you have a tendency to be too uniform. This gives you a much more natural feel of things being clustered just randomly. Yeah, you don't have as much control, but they look more realistic. So there's just a lot of benefits. Okay, I'm going to dry that now. If you are following along and you do not have an airbrush, you just skip this step. Not necessary, but what I'm going to use, these are called FX Texture. Actually, I think I'm gonna go with this one because it's got smaller bits. But you feel like they're papery and it's like, that is way overpriced for 3 pieces of a stencil. I've had them for, oh God, over 10 years. I've had these ones, these specific ones forever and they last. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is put 2 drops of the Vallejo Flow Improver in there. And a little bit of white paint. This is the Golden's Titanium White. They are my favorite airbrush paint. So all I'm going to do now, is a little bit of that galaxy going through there. Look how cool that looks. And I'll get the hint of some in the distance. And to do that, where I want it to be more crisp, I push it against, hold the stencil right up against the canvas. Where I want it to be softer, like here, I'm holding it at a distance. So I'm going to use Quadonkadonk Magenta. Same thing as before. I'm going to put a couple drops of Flow Improver, and this helps the brush not to clog. And notice I don't know if you can see, but I tested on the side here, and it's a good thing I did because a ton of white just came out, which is not the look I wanted. Okay. And I'm going to just go right over this, get a nice little purpley color, and I'm going to go over some of this with the blue as well. Again, if you don't have an airbrush, you're skipping this whole stage. It's weird too because this whole center looks black and it's not. It's like a violet. It's really pretty. Usually this camera does a better job of picking up color. Unfortunately, it's really not tonight. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a bit of my blue and I'm just going to go over this. And what's going to happen is, then the person, whoever gets this painting is going to be appreciative that I did this. Once I do my varnish and everything over it, this is going to have so much more depth than it would have if I left it more just flat. Like I've got so many glazes of iridescent color now that are, not iridescent, translucent, that's the word. And then we're gonna put one more layer of stars and then we can start on the pineapples. We're gonna start on the pineapples. No, we're gonna start on the cactus. So let me see if you can see the color any better over here. No, not, kinda. It is just not showing. It's such a pretty purple. and you don't see it at all. The violet is it's just not showing. That's always frustrating when doing a lesson. So for those of you who are watching this stream after I recorded, I will have the finished photo of this on my website so you can see what the actual color that this really looks like, because this should not look black here. I mean, I guess it's okay if it does. It just doesn't look as pretty as it does in person. I didn't thin it with enough water. It's a little chunky. Okay, I love it. Next, I need to dry that, and then we get to start with the not pine cones. Now they're pine cones. They've moved from pineapples to pine cones that are really just cactus. The land. I'm going to start with the landmass. I'm not going to worry about the not pine cones. The shape, if you're uncomfortable drawing these, you could take a white charcoal pencil, like the Generals. This is the one I would normally use, to sketch out where you want them to go. And for me, I might dot, like, okay, I want this one to come this high. But I'm just going to freehand this in because it's super easy. They so don't need to be exact to the reference photo here. So let's start with the base of the ground. And I'm keeping this in easy, that first layer. And I'll put some highlights here and there, but for the most part, going to be black. We've got a silhouette going. So I'm going to kind of dab that. This brush is super unhealthy. Even though it's stiff and not healthy, I don't want to throw it away because it's still useful for this dabbing technique. And then I can just fill that bottom in. This brush is frayed, it's damaged. I could probably help it by cleaning it in a brush cleaner and conditioner and letting it soak. But it's really nice for getting that bumpy look that I wanted for like bushes and such in the background. Okay, now I'm going to clean that brush. Now for the brush with the cactus, I called it the right word this time, that I need a healthy brush. So I'm going to rinse that guy off. And I need a brush where the bristles are in fairly good shape, so this guy will work. This one is a number 10 filbert. Is mark, okay, I want this cactus. I'm going to mark it, he's going to be in the third, so right about here. I want him to go about that high. I'm just going to pull that down, and as we get down here, this is the trunk where everything connects, so that can be a lot thicker. And now we have to connect them. And this does not need to be exact at all. Close is good enough for something like this. I need to mix, I'm thinning this with a bit of water so that it flows smoothly. And then the base is like right down in here. We thicken way up. I want the tips of those to be more rounded. Some of mine are a little pointy, so just go right back over it. I just push a little bit harder so I get a thicker line with the brush. We've got some little guys in the background. Some of this I'll switch to rounds. Again, thicker at the bottom. So I'm using that same brush, I just don't put much pressure. We've got another guy over here. I'm going to make him come to maybe this spot and then come down. Then thicker at the base again. And some of these lines don't make a lot of sense until I get some of the highlights in there. That should actually connect lower. I'm going to pull the land up a little bit more on some of this. The harder you push, the thicker that line is going to be. Okay, that looks good. And now we need to get the highlights. We are almost done with this one. Now for the highlights on here, you've got a few things you can do. You can be a bit more artsy and outline, you know me and my teal. I'm not going to do that on this one, but you could outline edges with teal. Is it accurate? Not even a little, but it looks cool. You could outline and make like really bold with the magenta or something like that from the background. That would also work. But here I want to make kind of a muted grayish green tone. And here's another thing. You may think, oh, green, cactus green. Not at night. That's not the color you would really see. It would be a much more neutral gray, like a highlight, but not a highlight, if that makes sense. So that is what we're going to do here. First, I'm going to have to experiment a little bit to get the color I want. So I'm going to be using the same yellow. And here's the next thing. If you look at it and think, okay, I need green. Well, don't go and grab a different green. Mix it from the colors you've already used. It will make way more sense and tie the painting together and feel like it's all part of the same scene. Some blue, some yellow, some black, and some white. Why black and white? Because that just guaranteed me gray. And I definitely want some gray. I think this might work. It might be too bright. Let's find out when I put it on here. Yeah, this is good because it just gives me a little bit, not a lot. I don't even know if you can see that. Like it's so not that much. And I'm going to do a little bit more with the lighter towards the very back, but I want this is going to be my darker tone. While I have that color mixed, I'm going to go ahead and use that on some of these guys. I'm taking a round brush right now. I'm just kind of backlighting these. Now, when you work on a canvas this smooth, you can get away with what we call dry brushing, which I normally don't recommend because it makes you look like an amateur. You can do it on this and it doesn't look like dry brushing because it's so smooth. Dry brushing is where you have hardly any paint and you just rub it across the canvas and you can get a highlight or whatever color, shadow, but you're not actually blending. You're not using any good technique. It's something that crafters do and beginners. My favorite are the books that act like that's some big thing that you need to know how to do as an artist. Usually with acrylics, you kind of want to avoid it. But anyway, point is, it's easy. That's why they teach it in a lot of the books. But it looks, can you guys see the highlights? They're a bit brighter than what it looks like on my screen. The one in the back, I'm not doing that. It's only these two here that will get some of these highlights. Okay, now I want to make more of a glow so it kind of fades. The transition between here and here needs to fade. I'm going to add a little bit of white. I've got some yellow and I've got some red. And I'm going to soften this transition right in here. It's too bright. I can glaze over to tone that down later. Add a little bit more color. I've got too much white in it. This guy's in the distance. I'm going to go ahead and just go over all of him. It pushes him back. Makes him fade more. This is going to help add a lot of depth to this. I mean, you can go with a simple silhouette, but we're just taking it up. We're very little work, and we'll bump it up a level. And if I go too crazy, no big deal. I'll just come back over some of this with black. Like, it's as simple as possible to cover some of this. Push this guy back by putting that yellow over him. Same thing with this one. He got pushed back. And I can just keep building until I get it exactly how I want. So it's the back edge that I keep toning down some. Push this guy back a bit too. Okay, now I am going to clean up that brush, and I'm going to line some definite highlights on these two here with the color that I just did. So I'm going to switch to a liner brush. So I've got to have some white mixed in with it. Yeah, it makes it peach, but if it's too peach when it dries, I'll just glaze whatever color I want on top. But if there's no white, if I just used red and yellow, it's just not going to show up. So that's why I've got to have white mixed in with it. But again, if it's too peach and not the pure color, we'll see what it looks like, then it's an easy enough fix. I need more water. If you don't have enough water, that will not flow smoothly or give you a thin line. A little bit more. Whoops, I was gonna avoid. Can you see on this brush, see how there's a chunk at the tip? That won't work. That is just gonna make a big old mess. Wipe some of that off. Now for some of this, I could even come up with more blues around the edge instead of the gold. That would be another option. Just a lighter version of what we have in that background. I like the gold myself, but that could work. Now, even if you're a painter who is a bit more advanced and you're doing like way more detailed work, this sort of thing is fun if you ever do art shows. You can do these and sell them for fairly inexpensive compared to your other work, considering they don't take as much time. So they're really nice, and they're just fun, honestly, because they are fast. You get that instant gratification. But it's a way for you to offer some pieces at different price points if you wanted that. Now you wouldn't want to do this level of detail, like the outer glow like this, on the stuff that's supposed to be in the distance, because it pulls them forward. It makes them feel too detailed. You want the two that are closest to the viewer. Those are the only two we're going to do this on. The hint of some of these lines in here, not too many. So a little bit more here on some of these highlights. We're just about done. Oops, that line was way too thick, so I'm just going to wipe that. Need to reload the brush. Just toning it down by sticking my finger in it. Push this guy back even a bit more. And by pushing these back, just look at what a difference it makes to the depth of the piece. And it's such a simple thing. I'm just going right over what's already there. And it makes them look so much farther away. You want to be able to see the signature, but you don't want to like overly focus on the signature. And you also want to keep in mind when this gets framed, the frame will just a little bit go over the edge here. So I want to make sure my signature is up so it doesn't get cut off. Now, if that stands out too much, and I think it does, that's more like, hi, I'm in your face, than I would like it to be. Then I'm going to dry this and just lightly glaze another color right over it to tone it down. And now what I'm going to do is mix my orange, just red and yellow. And I can just wipe that right over and tint the color. Push that back. I can even take that color. Ooh, yes, that looks good too. A little bit more of a glow. Oh, look how pretty that is. Notice that I'm not worried if I go over the cactus, and I'm not like trying to stay inside the lines. You really don't need to. And then I will varnish this with a high gloss varnish before I ship it. That is it. That is the finished painting. You can kind of see some of the detailing, the color shifts in there. And then this whole thing, it actually fades. This is more of a red. This goes up to magenta and purple all the way up into this. The purplish tone is all through here. It doesn't hit the blue and then the dark, dark blue up here. This is just not showing well for some reason. So that is the finished painting.
Hey, you. Yes, you. I see all your unused art supplies over there. Oh my God, those brushes aren't even opened yet. Tragic. You keep buying new fancy materials, but you don't use them because you don't want to waste them. Stop making your art supplies sad. Sign up for art lessons for as little as $4 a month. There are over 300 painting and drawing lessons available when you sign up, and new ones every week. Patreon.com/Lachri.